Then the question of playing the solo games, which I really think are going to demonstrate some important stuff about the systemic work. So one of them was, Will, which one did you want to talk about first?
I'm open to any of them. I enjoyed all three, but I definitely found some interesting dynamics from the ones I enjoyed more.
Swords of the Skull Takers. Let's talk about that one.
That was my favorite one.
It's really a good game, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's kind of funny because the name of it was so silly that I was dumb, and then it was my favorite of the three. It's kind of a silly name, though.
I think that was part of the curse of the Ronnies, which is that he chose the word sword and skull,
right?
And then he just went and slapped that on the page. And he had 24 hours. Now, granted, the Ronnies are supposed to produce an alpha that you love, not a finished game. So changing the title of it is certainly something he may do in the fullness of time. And I always thought it would do well. It's one of those games where I really don't know whether it would do well with a dedicated setting or not.
Yeah.
It's so nicely adaptable, and I've done different things with it that I kind of like it being open. But anyway, well, what happened to your guy?
I had tremendous luck, and I got a diabolic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I ended up getting the Wheel of Fortune on like the second round, so I was able to reflip a bunch, and I ended up getting all three of the Devil, the Tower, and the Hanged Man.
All right, then.
Met a man named X, who then I sacrificed my only NPC to, and turned the Skull Takers away, and then led that evil man back to my capital city.
All right, then.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I also thought it was instructive because I personally am kind of a control freak, and I like choices that I make, and I get annoyed when dice or like randomizers fuck me up, which it can be a flaw of mine. But it was interesting because this game was definitely the most bouncy. And
also it's the one where really nothing good happens to you because of the cards.
All right.
Hard. I mean, you get boons or like can find things, but really, it's a brutal game. It is meant to just knee strike your character into the ground. And it is. And let's take a look at the randomization. The randomization clearly comes in the card draws.
Yeah.
And the card draws are not kidding. I mean, when my characters, I have a play example of mine up. When my character's wife and kids disappeared, for example, when the friends that he made, eventually went under, I mean, you felt pretty bad. And one person I know, when the game was first presented, played it, and he did little video clips. So his characters. His text was actually his character's frantic transmissions sent out to who knows who, right?
That's
and
cool.
So, and it's very much in character, and it was really, really well done, actually. But it definitely has the role of randomization of no topsy-turvy again. What is it tonight? Yeah. Topsy-turvy again. Right. And without it ever losing a sense of really excellent continuity.
Yeah.
So
I thought it was cool because I thought it was well constructed and that the bounce fed into my decision making.
Right.
So like I got to make mechanical decisions to try to win the game. Then the bounce interacted with that, and then I got to decide what happened to the character.
Right.
I felt like the other two games were a lot more deciding what happened to your character with a lot less indication, a lot less feedback from the system.
Yes, it is definitely the most, like you say, the most bouncy, or the one that kind of makes you scramble.
Yeah.
And I think in a very productive way. You can imagine that a game built on the same principle could also instead be annoying.
Yeah.
Where you just feel like you're doing nothing but scramble, and there's no build, and there's no illumination of the character, and there's no real consequence. You live or die at the end, or you get this or that much gold at the end. You're like, what the fuck did I do that for?
Right. I definitely think that the balance is put in all the right places in this game, and then the decisions you make are in the right places.
So then you played Cathedral.
Yeah. Yeah, Cathedral I found interesting. I found it less fun, let's say. Like, I don't mean that as an insult, but it wasn't, I didn't find myself as entertained, but I definitely enjoyed some of the creative aspects of it. All of the bounce, or I shouldn't even say that, but any randomizers are just kind of small feedback options. They're sort of like, what is the skull like at this particular point in time? Right. What is the church like? And those are definitely helpful for, like, lubricating the imagination, getting you started somewhere.
Yeah. And also the number of years is the other.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, I felt it's interesting because I felt like a little bit tired of making decisions by the end of it, I think.
Right. Yeah, it's something one thing I did, I think I did give you the iteration. I originally had 5 turns and I cut it down to 4.
Yeah.
For that reason. And it's still in development. And one of the things I may do is shorten up or put in a little bit more reactivity at some point during the daydreaming process.
I did really like the text. I thought the text was pitch perfect as far as helping me to decide, or giving me pieces to get discoveries or revelations. What was the term?
I think they were discoveries. The notion of what pieces of the text were borked as you discovered them. Yeah, exactly.
And there was stuff when I first read it, I was like, weird. There's stuff that doesn't make sense here. Who is this person? And then I realized, that's intentional.
Right.
It gives you room to be like, okay, who is Harta? Is that Hart, or is that Harta's daughter? Is that something completely different? Yeah.
This was born out of a fairly deep effort I made to understand the Pentateuch, the 5 books of the Old Testament, and of the original 5, and then also the New Testament, specifically the Gospels. And I realized that when you didn't assume that it made sense and just read it, a lot of the time you're like, holy shit, how much crap got piled into this?
Right. And I didn't even know the thing about Moses and Aaron. I didn't know that until I read it.
Yeah, and so it was really, to me, so in many ways, I feel as though that completely crazy-ass thing that I threw into Cathedral really isn't a caricature of many of our scriptural texts. It's actually pretty representative of a number of them. There's, especially in reading Genesis closely, I mean, there are places where the story just picks up obviously in the middle from something and finishes over there, and you're kind of like,
the reader should understand the background.
Yeah, or even more so that, it's just a fragment that just got glued right there. And that's it. So anyway, there's a wide variety. I mean, we never do find out, never mind. Anyway, it's really, I thought, was fun to do. As far as that design is concerned, another thing I was really aiming at was the idea of how often do we get to really indulge ourselves sometimes. So the idea to just sit there and drift and see if your imagination can do something was part of what I was aiming at. But okay, and then the third one was
the plant.
Oh, right. Oof.
Yeah.
Brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that one was the most evocative. It sort of gave me the most sense of it gave me the most like bleed, I think.
Yeah.
I found that so it was kind of interesting because in Swords of the Skull Takers, there is a right with a tarot card. They have the page, so there's a right choice on whether to go higher or lower. Like one is always going to be in a position where higher or lower is better. But I still ended up feeling more invested in the outcome. Whereas like I didn't particularly care where I placed my tiles. As far as A, B, C, I would just not place them where I got a singleton, just to make sure I had more options. Otherwise, I didn't really care.
Yeah. So let's see if we compare the randomization in Swords of the Skull Takers. It comes from the tarot card draw, and then what you choose to do a little bit, right, with the cards. And that's pretty much it. The rest is creativity, interpretation, and carrying forward. And then the randomization in Cathedral is between each phase, the number of years that have passed, and the particular disposition of the same variables per phase at the beginning. And then nothing else. The rest is just blah, just go. Right? Free associating. Then the and then the non-random step of going and like literally choosing which piece to blot out and what to write instead, which is very non-random.
But fun.
I think the fun part for me and all the times I've played Cathedral is that I never have to struggle over that step. I know. I'm like, oh, that's got to go. And I don't know how that goes. I don't know how cognitively that happens, but I like it. So then in the third one, in the plant, the randomization comes from which of your cards that you've drawn. As I recall. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while. But you've drawn a card, and then you place it the way you want, but but what you draw matters. I remember in my outcome, the randomization made an enormous difference. It made an enormous difference to what kind of a person my character ended up being. When I played it, I found my daughter, but she was utterly terrified and had been running from me because of the brute that I was.
Interesting.
And there were a number of places where I could see how the draw had forced that interpretation of my character into place. And then how did yours end?
Mine ended with, I kind of interpreted it how I wanted to, but mine ended essentially with, she was on top of a giant annealing furnace, and she didn't need me to come save her, and she was telling me basically to go away. And it kind of worked out that she was like seeking out the ghost of my dead son who had died before. She like, a long time ago, and whose ghost I had seen in the plant at some point while I was working there. And so I burned down the factory. And he was I was kind of going in that part, and why I think it had the most bleed. One thing that I didn't particularly like is that I drew like one detail card the whole time.
Right, as I recall, I actually liked my details and was sort of sad not to see as many as I could.
The one detail I did draw was pretty cool. It fit really well. Kind of wanted more opportunity to do so.
Well, the cool thing about this exercise to me was simply to see that as long as a coherent subset of the activities are bouncy, that there's no sacred zone where bounce belongs. And other sacred zones where it doesn't. That you can structure the situational backstory resolving features of a game with bounce in different places. And I think that's where the exercise is aimed, was to try and sort of shake you out of shake a person out of where they, quote, know the dice rolls go. Or where they would say, well, I would always want to choose that. And then you play a game where you don't choose it, and you're like, wow, that actually was really, really good. I was forced to take what it gave me, and then that freed me up to make decisions about stuff that I have not made decisions about before.
Yeah, it suggested to me that, I think that there's no particular place to put bounce, but that bounce seems to, and it seemed to work best for me where it fed into a decision I then got to make.
Right.
And sometimes in the plant, I felt like the bounce didn't lead into a decision I got to make, which kind of felt hiccupy to me.
There are some characteristics of each designer that are very clear to me. Mm-hmm. Joe Prince likes, in all of the designs that I've played by him, he likes the character off balance. Mm-hmm. One of the interesting things about Contenders, which is pretty much a hack of My Life with Master, is that the boxer's fucked.
Yeah.
You made 3 phases into play, you suddenly realize that, this guy's candles are burning at both ends, and there is no, there is really no gets to go integrate with the townfolk ending like there is in My Life with Master.
Right.
That's not going to happen. And even if it did, I wouldn't believe it.
Right.
And then a number of his other designs, the shifting ground for the way the players interact, the rules they use, actually shifts on them. So a lot of the intensity of his games comes from the, I wouldn't call it rug pulls so much as, here are the dynamics of the game now. Given what's happened, here are the dynamics now. And you're dealing with new shit.
Right.
Whereas a lot of my games are very much about, okay, I've given you what I've given you, fly, be free.
Right.
Oh, couldn't do it? Yeah, fuck you then. Well, or more like, well, not this time. Maybe another time.
Right.
When that set of inspirations is in your zone, try again sometime. And that's a little, not all my games are like that, but a number of them have that quality.
Sure.
Then we're talking about Jason Morningstar, who is notable for Misery. Mm-hmm. That a great deal of his games involve finding out things you don't want to know, digging the situation in deeper, and shattering, catastrophic, breakdowns.
Fiasco.
Partly, yeah, but I'm thinking more of things like the earlier stuff, like the Shabalhiri Roach, and stuff like that too. Fiasco certainly refines a couple of them, but the plant, basically you end up with a tortuous symbolic journey to find out things you didn't want to know, and that your whole sort of action movie venturing into the plant to find my daughter. Well, no, that's just where it started back on paragraph 1.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to think about where the different designers have put their different randomizations toward, which seems kind of character. It doesn't mean that every game I do puts them in the same place, but it does mean that when you look at it, you can kind of see a creative aesthetic profile at work.
Right.
And that there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's the joy of not having a sacred space for where bounce must go.
Yeah.
You don't have to be locked in by that. So that's pretty cool. I'm glad you did that.
Yeah. That was fun.